Hey, welcome back. It's to psychology. It's chapter 20, and we're going to be discussing social cognition. Section 1. Attitudes are beliefs and feelings that can affect how people behave in certain situations. Attitudes develop in a number of ways throughout people's lives. Sometimes behaviors follow attitudes, and sometimes attitudes follow behaviors. Attitudes are an important aspect of our psychological lives because they are the major motivator for how we behave and view the world. So in this section, which you should be taking notes on, are what are some basic concepts of understanding attitudes, and how do attitudes develop? How are attitudes and behaviors related? Attitudes, beliefs, and feelings about objects, people, and events that can affect how people behave in certain situations. A major aspect of social cognition may be the primary motivator for how we behave and how we view the world. They are important because they foster strong emotions, and social psychology studies human interactions. So how do we develop our attitudes develop? Well, conditioning. Learning by reinforcement. Parents who believe that it is important to share may praise or reinforce a child who shares a toy with a friend. A child who cares acquires an attitude of the importance of sharing. Observational learning. Teens may observe that classmates who dress, talk, or act in certain ways seem to be admired by their peers. Teen acquires attitude about these behaviors and may mimic them. Commercial advertising often relies on observational learning in order to sell products. Cognitive evaluation. Evaluating evidence and forming beliefs on the basis of these evaluations. Part of the process is to examine data carefully. Bias, what is gain? People are especially likely to evaluate evidence when they will have to justify their choice. Cognitive anchors are persistent beliefs that shape their ways in which persons sees the world and interpret events. Often the person's earliest attitudes. People who hold on to cognitive anchors for decades rarely adopt a significantly new attitude. Definition of attitudes suggests that people's behaviors are always consistent with their attitudes. However, people often behave in ways that contradict their attitude. When behavior follows attitudes, behavior in accordance with attitude is more common if a behavior is tied to an attitude. Strong attitudes are better predictors of behavior than weak. More likely when people are aware of their attitudes. When attitudes follow behavior, attitudes are likely to follow behavior when people begin to behave in ways that conflict with their attitudes. Dissonance arises from conflict between attitudes and behavior. Attitudes and achievement. How do you feel about school? According to a recent study, your attitude and behavior can have a direct impact on your academic achievement. Researchers looked at students' engagement in school or their level of participation and interest, and at the students' own view of their academic success. The study demonstrated that those who were more engaged and had more positive view of their abilities achieved greater academic success. These two traits are closely linked. High expectations and clearly defined rules also help student achievement. Activities that encourage interaction and result in more engaged student. Section 2. Persuasion. Persuasion is a direct attempt to influence others. People can be persuaded via the central route using evidence, logic, and via the peripheral route using positive or negative associations and cues. The main idea of persuasion section, people use the range of persuasive techniques to try to change other people's attitudes. These techniques can be direct, relying on logic or evidence, or indirect, relying on emotions and perceptions. Reading focus. What are the main methods of persuasion? How do the message and messenger relate to persuasion? How do the situation and the audience affect persuasion? And how can one resist persuasive messages? Persuasion is a direct attempt to influence other people's attitudes or views. Two basic ways to persuade people. There's a central route where you use evidence and logical arguments to persuade people. Then there's the peripheral route, where you attempt to associate objects, people, or events with positive or negative cues. The most persuasive messages use both routes. So the central route of persuasion uses evidence and logical arguments to persuade people. The peripheral route uses this as an indirect method to make positive or negative association using objects, people, or events. The message stands alone in the central. The message stands alone in a central route and is a two-sided argument. For example, the message is straightforward but attempts to discredit opposing views. The messenger plays the important role in the peripheral route. Messages delivered by trustworthy, attractive, or familiar people can help persuasive messages succeed. In the central route, the message itself is important. In the peripheral route, the message is important, but it does not stand alone. The messenger also plays an important role. Repeated exposure to stimulus eventually results in more favorable attitude toward that stimulus. Advertisers and others use repetition to create positive reactions to their product. Two-sided argument is the messenger represents not only his or her side of the argument, but also opposition's side to discredit the opposition's view. Admitting weakness can make an argument more believable. Emotional appeals arouse such feelings as loyalty, admiration, desire, jealousy, or fear rather than convincing through evidence and logic. A peripheral route. Glittering generalities. The use of vaguely positive words and images without citing specific evidence or promises. The role of the messenger. Some people are more persuasive. Those who are experts are trustworthy, physically attractive, or similar to their audience in ethnicity, age, or physical characteristics. Messengers who stand to gain from their effort are less believable. Public safety messages such as this one often appeal to emotions because they often deal with potentially tragic subjects and situations. The emotional appeal can also shock the viewer into an agreement. What emotional appeal is being used here? Is it effective? Why or why not? When a person is in the good mood, he or she is less likely to evaluate messages carefully. Most messages are aimed at a specific audience. Differences in the audience can affect the best way to deliver messages to be the most persuasive. Sales resistance having no trouble turning down requests to buy products or services. People without sales resistance find it difficult to refuse a sales pitch or other types of requests. Two factors may affect sales resistance: self-esteem and social anxiety. Section 3. Prejudice. Prejudice is a generalized attitude toward a specific group of people. Prejudiced attitudes are based on the stereotypes which can then lead to discrimination. People can overcome prejudice by learning about others and by speaking up when others communicate or behave in prejudicial ways. Our main idea here is that prejudice occurs when people prejudge and stereotype other groups and can result in discrimination. Prejudice has a deep-seated social and psychological causes that can be overcome. So you should take notes on this section. Your answers should be: what attitudes and actions are part of the prejudicial view? What are some causes of prejudice? And then what are some ways that individuals can help overcome prejudice? Prejudice is a generalized attitude toward a specific group or people. People who are prejudiced judge other people on the basis of their group membership rather than as individuals. Prejudices are based on stereotypes. Stereotypes are unchanging, oversimplified, and usually distorted beliefs about groups of people. People tend to develop stereotypes as a way to organize information about their social world. People also assume that most people who are different from themselves are similar to others in many ways. Stereotypes are harmful because they ignore people's individual natures and assign traits by group membership. In recent years, Americans' opinions of immigrants have become more negative. Some people harbor negative stereotypes about immigrants, generally in relation to the employment and crime. 12% of Americans who feel that immigrants have a positive effect on the job opportunities for them and their families. 34% of Americans feel that immigrants have a negative effect on job opportunities for them and their families. 4% of Americans feel that immigrants make the crime situation better. 58% of Americans feel that immigrants make the crime situation worse. So stereotypes can include positive traits. Stereotype threat occurs when members of a group are aware of a stereotype that says they cannot perform a certain task and perform worse at a certain task because of this assumption. Stereotypes threat occurs when members of a group are aware that the stereotype that says they cannot perform a certain task and perform worse at a task because of this assumption. Even positive stereotypes can be harmful. Discrimination, the unfair treatment of individuals because they are members of a particular group. Skin color, sex, religion, and even weight can be the basis of discrimination. Victims of every type of discrimination often begin to see themselves as inferior and have low self-esteem. Causes of prejudice are exaggerating differences. Some are prejudiced because they exaggerate how different others are from themselves. People tend to prefer those who are similar to themselves. Some are prejudiced against those who are different economic group. Such beliefs may be used as an excuse for injustices. Social learning, children acquire the attitudes from parents. Prejudices are passed from parents to children. Victimization is sometimes people who are victims of prejudice feel empathy for others who are discriminated against, but some may come to discriminate against others, a third group, in order to feel superiority. A scapegoat is an individual or a group that is blamed for the problems of others because the real cause of the problem is either too complex or too powerful or too remote to be confronted. The term scapegoating refers to aggression against the targeted group. A scapegoat group has characteristics that make it highly visible and safe to attack. The most famous example is the Holocaust, in which millions of Jews were killed and blamed for all of Germany's problems. Overcoming prejudice. Although it's difficult to overcome, it is possible. Increase contact among members of different groups, speaking up when other people act or talk in ways that reveal prejudicial attitudes. Set an example with your own words and actions. Seeds of Peace. The organization Seeds of Peace believes the best way for people from around the world to change their attitude about each other is to meet face to face. Seeds of Peace began in 1994 as a way to bring youth from Israel, Egypt, and Palestine together to live and learn together. Although the camp began with children from the Middle East, it eventually included teens from other major conflict regions such as South Asia and the Balkans. Main focus is to develop leadership skill required to advance reconciliation, coexistence in their troubled homelands. Facing and interacting with very people they are supposed to hate provides the teens with opportunities to view each other as individuals. So how do participants learn about one another as individuals, and what do you think the Seeds of Peace summer camp helped participants dispel prejudicial attitudes? Section 4. People form attitudes about another based on their social perceptions. First impressions play a large role in this process. In general, people tend to judge behaviors of others more harshly than they do their own behavior. They also tend to attribute different motives to others than they do themselves. The multiple forms of nonverbal communication have important parts in the perception. Social perception refers to how we see and what we feel about others. Social perception is heavily influenced by first impressions, differing vantage points, and nonverbal cues. To what extent do people form perceptions based on first impressions is one of the first questions you need to be able to answer. Another question would be, what does attribution theory say about how we perceive ourselves and others? And finally, how does nonverbal communication influence our perception of other people? These are the questions you should be able to answer upon completion of this section. Our social perception, the ways in which people perceive one another, it affects the attitudes people form toward one another. People think that their first impression of other people are accurate and are often based on how a person looks. Primacy effect is the tendency for people to form opinions of others on the basis of first impressions. How people interpret later behavior of others is influenced by their first impressions. Recency effect is people change their opinion of others on the basis of recent interactions instead of holding on to their first impressions. Attribution theory is a tendency to explain behavior in terms of either dispositional or personality factors, or in terms of situational or external factors. Fundamental attribution area is the overestimation of the effect of disposition causes for another person's behavior and underestimation of the situational causes. The actor-observer bias, tendency to attribute the behavior of others to the internal factors and behavior itself to external factors. Self-serving bias is the tendency to attribute own successes to dispositional factors and own failures to situational factors. So our nonverbal communication is forms of nonverbal or unspoken communication include facial expression, gestures, posture, distance we keep from others. Body language can affect other perceptions of people, largely because it often indicates feelings. Some nonverbal forms of communication are learned very early. Physical contact. Touching is one way to communicate nonverbally. Studies have found that touch can affect willingness to help, the amount given in a tip, and favorable interactions. Eye contact. People can learn a great deal about feelings of others from eye contact. When a speaker is looking into the eyes of a listener, the speaker is usually telling the truth. Gazing greatly influences relationships. Staring is usually interpreted as a sign of anger. Cultural considerations. There's a considerable cultural variation in the use of nonverbal communication. The amount of distance people keep from each other differs around the world. Becoming more aware of nonverbal communication can increase understanding of others. Section 5. Interpersonal attraction. Attraction is the process by which people are drawn to others who appeal to them in a number of ways. People are attracted by physical appearance, by similarity of personal background and attitudes. Attraction often leads to friendship or to romantic relationships. So the main idea of this section is people are attracted to others for many reasons. Personal appearance and personality traits play significant roles, as do similarity and reciprocity. So your questions that you need to be answered in this section are, how do concepts of physical appearance vary? Why are similarity and reciprocity essential to attraction? And what is the difference between friendship and love? So this is a picture of some Wadabi men. They show off their eyes and white teeth to import their facet of their culture's ideal of male beauty and with their facial expressions. Physical appearance. Attraction, the process by which people are drawn to others who appeal to them in a number of ways. Factors of attraction include physical appearance, similarity to ourselves, and the evidence that our attraction is returned. Smiling is perceived as more attractive. Large eyes, high cheekbones, and narrow jaws are more attractive in Britain and Japan. Some evidence exists that we do not learn what is attractive. Differences in body shape, great deal of variation of people's standard of attractive body shape. Initial attraction one feels for another person may be based on a person's physical appearance, but other traits become important with time. We are usually more attracted to people who are similar to us. Matching hypothesis theory, people tend to choose friends and partners of those who are similar to themselves in attractiveness. Similarity in characteristics, friends and partners tend to be similar in race, ethnicity, age, level of education, and religion. They often have similar attitudes. Reciprocity is the mutual exchange of feelings or attitudes, and it applies situations to which a person we like us back. Customs governing how people beautify themselves differ widely among society. The use of cosmetics and decoration with natural materials are common practices. Some societies have gone further, altering the skin or even the bone structure. Clearly, some aspects of who and what is attractive are learned. Scarification is a practice in some African societies. Often the process is undertaken at the important stages in a girl's or woman's life, such as puberty or marriage. The scarring is often done in intricate patterns to accentuate a person's beauty. The scars can also be markers of fertility, courage, and family or a group identity. In Japan, during the Heian period, makeup was an important part of beauty regimen. Women whitened their faces with rice powder. They also shaved their eyebrows and replaced them with 2 inked thumbprints in high on the forehead near the hairline. In addition, the women artificially blackened their teeth. Mayan head shaping. Among the Maya of Central, parents used boards and straps to flatten the heads of their infants. One study of pre-Columbian Mayan remains showed that shaping in nearly 90% of the remains. The Yanomamo women among the people of South America beautify themselves with polished sticks inserted into the facial perforations. They also may wear flowers and palm fronds or other leaves or plants. Facial painting is reserved for special occasions such as feasts. Yeeks. Friendship and love. Friends and people for whom one has affection, respect, and trust. Friends are people for whom one has affection, respect, and trust. The people we choose as friends tend to be people with whom we have frequent contact, such as fellow students. Love can enter into the feelings of attachment between children, parents, siblings, and other family members, as well as feelings of patriotism for one's country or strongly held values. Most commonly, however, love refers to the feelings of mutual attraction affection, and attachment shared by people who are in love. Triangular model of love. Sternberg identified 7 types of love, each characterized by at least one of 3 components: intimacy, passion, or commitment. Intimacy is closeness and caring. It's reflected by mutual concern and sharings of feelings and resources. Passion is the feeling of romantic and sexual attraction. It's reflected by verbal expression of love, gazing and hugging and kissing. Commitment is a couple's recognition that they are in love and want to be together for better or for worse. So that concludes our discussion of Chapter 20, Social Cognition.